Hey everybody, welcome back to the FSN Education Center. I'm Hannah and today we're going to work on a dozen. So everybody usually knows this because this is one of the first things that you do learn as a new florist. So we're going to grab our roses, grab our filler, and we're going to get started. So today we're going to use our nice red Freedom roses. We're going to go ahead and pick about 12. Now I love these roses not only because they're beautiful in color, but because the size of the head does expand and grow once time goes on. Just lovely. So we're going to grab 12 of these. All right. So what I like to do is I like to go ahead and kind of figure out which one is the tallest one of the bunch. So it looks like it's going to be one of these. And I'm going to go ahead and lay them over to the side. Now, once you've processed your flowers, obviously you don't have any thorns. You have a lot less leaves. So we're going to use our tallest flower, but we're going to go ahead and green our vase first. So now that we have our roses over to the side and we know which ones we're going to use, we are going to green the vase. Now first, what I like to do with the vase is I like to use a nice tall aspidistra leaf. This is going to cover the vase so that way you don't see the stems of the actual flowers. So let's go ahead and cut and fix that. So you're just going to cut off the stem, and then with your knife, you're going to just scrape along kind of the vein of the flower, just where the stem meets it. So just like that. And then you're going to wrap it around and just toss it into the vase. Now, because this is a larger vase and a circular vase, you see that there's a little bit of patch here. So we're going to go ahead and cut another aspidistra leaf just to cover the back as well. So we'll grab one of a similar size, cut, and scrape. And we'll just use it to cover up. Okay. There we go. So now we have all of our bottom covered. And now we're going to use our greenery. So we have our leather fern today that we're going to green with. Now leather is nice because it has such a wide space with all of these different leaves. So it adds a lot of texture, but it also adds a lot of ground. So what you're going to do whenever you green your vase is you're going to make kind of a grid. So you'll start with your lower pieces just to make the bottom fourth. So you'll make a grid down at the bottom, two arching like that. And then you'll add a cross, and you'll kind of want to make sure that these stick out a little bit. Go across. And then once we have our grid, we're going to keep these pieces nice and long because we do need them to kind of reach the bottom. Once you start building up, you will start to have longer stems, so that way they can just reach higher and higher and higher. So keep going. And you're really just trying to layer and layer and layer and go kind of like in the windows of the actual green, so that way you can get all the way around. Because what you're really making is a grid system, so that way the flowers themselves can interlock within the stems at the bottom and they won't move around. That's perfect for delivery. That's very crucial for just the existence of the arrangement, particularly because you don't want it to move around once you have your flowers set. And what I'm doing here is I'm just pulling apart any of the leaves that I see that aren't maybe not completely perfect, or maybe they're a little bit droopy like this one. I'm just pulling that off. And with each of those little pieces, you can save them for maybe if you're doing a basket arrangement, or if you're doing something with all the breaks. It's a perfect use for them, and it makes sure that nothing goes to waste. So before we add any flowers in here, we're going to use our leaf shine just to make sure that all of these nice little pieces of greenery are perfectly shiny. It makes it look even more polished than if we had just left it alone. So remember, whenever we found the tallest rose, we're going to have that be our center rose. All right, so the way that I was taught is you put 1 in the middle, 4 around it, and 7 at the very bottom. So you see how this rose is peaking up quite high? That is excellent for the first rose, particularly because you want it to show out from the green, you do want your roses to peek out from the green, maybe not necessarily be super close to the green, like if you were to put a rose here. You want it to be tall and nice. That's what everyone is looking at and looking to. So make sure that you keep your rose stems very long whenever you're cutting them, just to make sure that you have exactly the length that you need. So now we're just going to start putting them around. Before we do any more, we are going to check for guard petals. So I've already checked guard petals on a couple of these, but we're going to take off any unsightly petals that we might not like and that we probably don't want seen. So again, we're just going to place, and a good way to go about it is if you do north, east, south, and west. Okay, so we have our top one done and we have our 4 done. So now we're going to use the rest of the 7 down below. Now with each of these tiers, you're going to cut a little lower because you need them to be tiered. So with this one, we kind of measured it to where this isn't going to be the same height as this one. And if it is, you just pull it out and cut it a little bit better. So with these, there's no particular northeast, southwest. You pretty much just stick them in the windows of the other ones. So see how this one goes between the two? It goes between and it nicely creates that long line. You really want them to be circular and you want them to kind of go out in different directions, but still look cohesive. Now with all of these, you can always move around your flowers. You can always move them to, if it looks a little bit better, moving around. There's no particular set place for them to be, just however it kind of looks better. Remember to remove the guard petals. As you can see it a little bit, there's obviously some damaged petals. That really just assists the rose whenever it's growing, but whenever you put it in the arrangement, you don't actually want your person to see the outside of the rose, just because it's not as lovely as the inside of the rose. And with our final rose, we're going to go ahead and put it right over here. So it may be looking a little bare, it may be looking a little moved around, but that's okay. We're going to go ahead and straighten up some of these. Now, once you get to this phase, this is where you'll start adding in, if you have any experimental greenery, you can go ahead and toss that in, or you can toss in some filler. Now, for today's filler, we have baby's breath. This is very popular, and this is also one that most flower shops will indeed have. This is very common for a lot of dozens or for bridal work, or especially for prom work. So most flower shops should have this. So with baby's breath, you have quite a few different almost branches or channels. So with these, we don't want to stick the entire piece in here just like that. We're going to break it up. So let's break off a couple pieces. They can be a little stubborn, so we'll clip them. Just like that. But with these pieces, you don't want to make them too short, particularly because you still have to reach the base water at the bottom. So you don't want it to be too short whenever you get down there. So you're just going to go right in and fill in the cracks. With each piece of filler that you do, you need to make sure that it goes all the way down into the base, because otherwise the flowers will die. So just make sure that it reaches all the way down. And again, you can always adjust your roses because you will be kind of turning it around pretty often, and you want it to look pretty linear. You want it to look very, where there's a lot of roses on each side, and you want them to be mostly at the same heights where it's one tall, one taller, and then a little bit shorter toward the inside. And you don't want to fill it too much with filler. You just kind of want those pops everywhere. But you want it to look continuous. So you don't want it to look splotchy, like where you have just one giant clump over here, nothing over there, and then one giant clump over here. You want it to be pretty consistent throughout. So you want to give just enough to where it doesn't look like it's only in one place or a lot of it is just in one place. You want it to look pretty continuous where you can't tell where the specific branch starts and where it ends. Okay, and now all you'll do is just make sure that your roses are exactly where you'd like them. Make sure that they're peeking out from any filler and from any greenery that you have. And that they look pretty good and nice, round and circular. And there you have it, 1 dozen fresh red roses, an order that you'll see a lot in a flower shop. So this is FSN Education Center. My name is Hannah, and I'll see you next week.